Alright, well, hi guys. Today we're going to talk about another spelling rule, and this time the one we will see is the I before E rule. And by the way, this is a rule that most English speakers learn at very young ages, and the way I've presented it in the next slide it sounds like a poem. So if you remember the poem, at least maybe the first part, it will help you remember what this rule is all about and how to spell some words. Okay, so the I before E rule. It says I before E except after C and when sounding like A as in neighbor and way. So look, it says that I always comes before E except when the IE comes after a C. So let's take a look at this example right here. Belief. I before E and there's an L right there. So when there is no C, it always goes I-E, I-E. But take a look at this word, receipt. In this case, we've got the I-E thingy, but we've got a C right before. So it's being followed by a C. So when you see that C, the I-E does not go anymore. Instead, you invert it. So it would be an E-I. All right? So I-E, I-E, because it's being followed by an L. But in this case, the IE does not work anymore because it comes before the letter C. Okay? So I before E, except after C, and when sounding like A, as in neighbor and way. Look at this. If I follow the rule, it says I before E, right? But in this case, the IE sound is sounding like an A, neighbor, way. When it has that A sound, it is no longer an I before E, but instead it's an E before I, just as if it were with a C. All right? It's a bit tricky, but it's not that hard to understand. So when it sounds like an A or it has a C before it, you don't write the IE, you write the EI. Okay? Either, neither, leisure, and C's are exceptions if you please. You see? It's no longer the IE, there's no IE here, but these are exceptions because it doesn't have a C on the beginning, but you still write it EI, EI, EI. Weird is weird, and it makes the rule bunk. And whoever spelled Budweiser the first time was drunk. So take a look at this. I told you that you write IE, right? I before E. But in this case, there's no C, and they wrote EI. So weird is one of those words that breaks the rule, such as either, neither, leisure, and C's. And the same with Budweiser, right? So always remember, I recommend that you remember this first part of the poem. I before E except after C, and when sounding like A as in neighbor and way. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at some examples. Let's take a look at this word, receive. I always told you that you begin with I before E. But in this case, there's a C. So it's not I before E, it's E before I. In this case, we've got the I before E in belief. But since there is no C, there's an L here, it continues to be I before E. The same thing here. I before E, there is no C, that's why it is I before E. Weird. Remember I told you that weird was that weird word that breaks the rule? So it's not I before E, it's E before I. Peace. I before E, because there is no C. Receipt. Ooh, here we've got the C, therefore it's no IE, it's EI. And the same thing with neighbor. Do you guys remember why neighbor has the E before I? Because it has that A sound, neighbor. When it has the A sound, you invert it, so it's no longer IE, it's EI. So I hope you guys understood this rule. It's a bit confusing, but at the end, if you understand it and you memorize that first part of the poem, it's going to be much, much easier. Remember, I before E except after C, or when starting in A as in neighbor and way. Keep that in mind. Remember, weird is the exception. Either, neither, C's, leisure are also an exception to the rule. All right? So good luck. Go ahead and do the Edmodo quiz, and I hope you understand it. Bye. See you later.